Okay, so this is a fascinating story of a company that managed to fight back despite international sanctions from powerful economies like the United States. And in every which way possible, the company was forced to back off and forced to suppress its activities. And what? Guess this is amazing that despite all these hardships, they actually managed to come back like a phoenix and managed to beat everybody at the same game. So, in the next few slides, let's just exactly see what has transpired in the last 6 years. Okay, so interestingly, in the last 4 to 5 quarters, and I think it's even 6 quarters, but in the last 4 quarters for sure, if you look at the handset market and iPhones, volumes have actually started dropping. Now, it's not exactly noticeable on the top line because Apple has such a large revenue outside of iPhone as well that, and don't forget, the iPhone per unit costs have been going up. So the top line has not been impacted at all. It's actually gone up significantly. But if you look at the volume of iPhone sales, is actually begun to drop. Now, we do not know if this could change immediately. And just to be fair, this handset subdued market performance has been somewhat the case for the last 4 to 6 quarters across the board, including Huawei, Samsung, everyone, for two reasons. Number one, post COVID and the supply chain issues globally, there was a lot of component float time that actually started impacting all handset vendors. And after that, there was the 5G factor, right? There was a lot of hype about 5G potentially becoming the big driver for renewed handset sales, but that has really not panned out. In fact, there's not a single operator worldwide where 5G has really taken off as expected. So these two factors have actually caused a general, some sort of a slowed down type of performance on the handset side. And so to give credit where it's due, I think Apple otherwise is absolutely robust, and its cash in the bank is I think still in excess of $100 billion. So it's in good shape. But the point is actually what else is beginning to happen, and we'll get to that very soon. So if you notice a little bit of history, just back up a little bit. 2018 was the year that the United States slammed sanctions on Huawei, ZTE, both Chinese telecom infrastructure as well as handset players at that time in the United States and globally. Now, this for a variety of reasons this was done. Also, a number of Chinese handset vendors and and equipment vendors like Huawei were actually using several American chipsets, which was also prevented. So there was two bidirectional embargo, bidirectional sanctions. So American companies could not ship components and software to the US, to China, and China could not sell in the US market. So this was actually beginning, this was done to in terms of protectionism, national security, and all of that. Now, what happened post that is actually interesting, and we'll get into that right now. The following things have happened, which are major trends to note. So, in the last 7 odd years, 5 plus years, Harmony, which was a non-existent operating system for the mobile, and was actually a weakness for Huawei because Huawei essentially was very well into hardware and firmware and so on, but they were not really into the mobile OS. And this whole situation forced Huawei to actually go in and build their own domestic homegrown mobile OS, which was called Harmony. And believe it or not, today, as of July 2024, Harmony has shipped close to 1 billion devices of worldwide, including China. So that is how they're now beginning to say, look, we are asserting ourselves. We have our own OS. Our dependency on anybody else, including Android or anybody else, is minimalistic or zero. Second is on the chipset side, they've actually entered and started building 7 nanometer chipsets. And this is another important thing. There's an investment arm that Huawei has conceptualized and funded, and it's called Hubble, Hubble, as you can see on the screen. Now, the thing about Hubble is Hubble has picked over 100 high-tech, emerging, requisite handset and device company related uh, production, intellectual property development, and so on, to enhance the overall offerings of Huawei. So where Huawei is not able to actually source from a US company or does not have that strength, they've actually helped incubate it which means they have full control, a reasonable level of control, and actually bring those intellectual properties to light and then integrate that into their own offerings at any time. And who knows, some of them actually beat the US at its own game. I want to skip a slide and go down a little bit. And if you look at what the last but one line, that's why I was surprised too when I saw it. In a recent interview, Jensen Huang of NVIDIA has actually said, we actually do not have competition in the AI chipset factory, AI chipsets space that we're in. At this point, we really don't have anything to worry about, except if there's someone that might come up and be noticeable as a peer, it could potentially be Huawei. That says a lot about where Huawei is. So to be sure, Huawei is already building its own comparable, AI chipsets for its market as well as the world global market. And they've said that its performance has increased and is now comparable. I mean, it's saying that they're not yet there, but they're saying that very soon they could be there. And knowing Huawei, you probably should take this very seriously because they'll get there. Another one is a very interesting thing, which this is how things come back and bite you when you become too aggressive and so when the United States actually slammed these sanctions on Huawei, Apple was the number one handset vendor in the Chinese market. Now, and they enjoyed this luxury for a long time and premium pricing and cash flow, all of that. But post this event and after Huawei started looking back into its own domestic market, they've now risen to number one by increasing their market share from 8.1% to 15.3%. And Apple has moved down to number three, which means a lot, which means that some of, if not official, at least some sort of a de-Americanization or de-import type philosophy has now been not just proposed, but has gotten implemented. And a lot of components now are even entirely made in China and not being sourced from the US or Europe. And in fact, I was reading somewhere that it said about 13,000 components they had identified in the beginning of last year. They've already moved entirely away from an import dependency, which means they're all now being made in China. And they have another 30 odd thousand that they want to completely replace. So, when the markets bring in geopolitical situations, the regulation and so on to suppress your innovation and suppress your creativity, you have to go back and believe in yourself and go out there and build. Exactly what Huawei has done. Look how they managed to build back from their own domestic markets and then come to strength. And you'll see some of the other spaces which I'm talking about in detail. Let's go into that now. So if you look at the infrastructure piece, and I'm no longer talking about the device or handhelds, and you look at the infrastructure piece from the telco infrastructure, ISP infrastructure, data infrastructure, cellular, wireless, that space. The infrastructure piece was the actual DNA of Huawei and Ericsson and Nokia as well. So these are the big infrastructure projects with several $billion per year per country. And the US had Huawei as a very major player, Huawei and ZTE. Now, in a single stroke of a signature or in an indictment, they actually decided to eliminate those two players and keep the market reserved for the rest, which means essentially Ericsson and Nokia. And if you look at the numbers that I have, and again, these numbers, please go back and check if you want to use them. Some of these maybe not accurate. I picked them off the net, and I'm not therefore not necessarily attributing it to a research agency. If you noticed, Huawei has consistently outperformed both Ericsson and Nokia overall. If you look at the telco infrastructure and the enterprise telco infrastructure pieces, not including other spaces where Huawei is. So now Huawei is already the number one player on the planet for telco infrastructure. So which means even if you cut out or keep markets out of bounds for certain players, they somehow manage to actually go out there and create their own markets. Either they are generating new revenues from existing customers, building new revenues from the home market, or going into new markets and getting new revenues. My question, therefore, is what about Ericsson and Huawei? I mean, what about Ericsson and Nokia? The markets that were, already there with them. At least you should have grown that. Now the two other players have been thrown out. But if you go back and check, Ericsson and Nokia numbers have actually dropped. So my question is, what is going on? I mean, we all understand that some markets have changed. They've actually dropped because some telco expansions have not happened as planned, and so on. 5G new deployments have not happened. Initial infrastructure has been deployed, but no expansions, no enhancements. But then, this is really the question that Ericsson and Nokia should ask themselves. Because despite cutting out 2 out of 4 players from the market, you're still not grown. I think that's some food for thought. Moving on, if you look at the internal business segments of Huawei, I was very happy to see the kind of growth. Look at this. The consumer handset space is growing at about 17.3% year on year. The cloud computing space has grown about 21.9%, is about close to 22% year on year. Intelligent automotive is a new space that is not as old as the others, but that has started growing. ICT infrastructure is the general networking, enterprise networking, routing, all of that. That has grown, but very, very low. It's not as high, but it's still not down. Um, this is the kind of impressive growth that Huawei has consistently shown. I mean, I've worked with them at multiple projects. I've actually been to their facilities those days. I mean, these guys are just unbeatable. You really cannot drive a Chinese company up the wall. They will come back and fight and never give up. I think this is something I wanted to really share here, because startups, this is a very startup thing, right? I mean, startups have to have this incredible never say die type of attitude, but you normally don't see this in large companies, because they do other things to to stay alive. But these guys, I mean, hats off to these guys, frankly. So let me move on and show you a few other things. Again, this one is their spread, global footprint by continent. Every zone is growing except EMEA, Europe, Middle East, and Africa. I think that, according to this, is down slightly, but other markets are beginning to go. America is definitely South America, it's not North America. So this is just a quick snapshot of a very inspiring story about how even as a large company, sometimes you do manage to hold on to your startupness and then not just survive but thrive. I want to leave you with just one last slide. I'm launching Tonsepai Academy shortly, and this will be dedicated to helping startups, SMEs, mid-sized companies to come up with modern, contemporary, highly efficient, super fast go-to-market methods. I'll be teaching them online as well as through video courses. So do join the community, follow, and be in touch. And I look forward to connecting with you again in the next video. Till then, never say die. Good day. Bye-bye.